I think I might actually have some good news for you today. And that is that there's a high likelihood that interest rates are going to start coming down, and that can benefit all of us, whether you already have a mortgage at a fixed rate that you like, or if you're in a high interest rate mortgage, car loans, credit card debt. It could have a roll down effect in many, many areas of our lives. Let's start off with a New York Times article that was written by Colby Smith. The title is Powell Sends the Strongest Signal Yet That Interest Rates Are Coming. And the subtitle is Jerome Powell said the balance of risk across the economy had started to shift, raising the odds that the central bank lowers borrowing costs at its next meeting, which is coming up in September. Okay, here's a quote from the article. Mr. Powell held back from explicitly endorsing a reduction in borrowing costs at the Fed's next meeting, which, as I record this, is coming up in just a couple weeks. But Mr. Powell's emphasis on the prospects of a weakening economic backdrop made clear in the reporter's mind that a cut is likely coming next month. And here's a couple quotes. The balance of risk appears to be shifting, and the shifting balance of risk may warrant adjusting our policy stance, said Jerome Powell. Okay, and this is about as close as you're ever going to get to the Federal Reserve or certainly Jerome Powell saying, "Hey, heads up, we're going to cut rates at the next Federal Reserve meeting." They don't do that, but they do give very strong hints. And people are asking, does this have anything to do with the very public battle that President Trump has with Jerome Powell? The article talks about this. The article says the president wants borrowing costs that are 3 percentage points lower than the current range of 4.25 to 4.5%. The Fed has opted to keep interest rates steady so far this year after a series of reductions in the second half of 2024. So, do I think that this is a result of the pressure that President Trump is putting on Powell? Not directly, but clearly everybody in the US and everybody on the board of the Federal Reserve knows that there's a lot of pressure being applied on them by President Trump, including, putting some pressure on Powell for the cost overruns for a renovation of the Federal Reserve building and other members, voting members of the Federal Reserve. There's been a lot of pressure put on them. So it could be a result of some of that pressure. I don't think it has all to do with that, but it certainly has helped push the group, I think, to saying, hey, if we can justify this, it'd be nice to get this personal pressure taken off of us. Okay, another thing that Jerome Powell does every 5 years, or the Federal Reserve chairman does every 5 years, is they update kind of the framework for how they're going to operate over the next 5 years. And I think it's really interesting that there's going to be a change here. Here's what the article says from the New York Times. The 2020 framework established that the Fed would temporarily tolerate periods of higher inflation to make up for past stretches when it was too low, with an aim to average 2% over time. And what we're about to read from the article is about as close as a statement of, we made a mistake admission from the Federal Reserve. Here's what the article says. Mr. Powell on Friday confirmed that the Fed would scrap what he described as the earlier makeup strategy, making up for low interest earlier, and added that the idea of an intentional moderate inflation overshoot had proven irrelevant. So, this idea of we're going to tolerate higher inflation because we think it's transitory, what he's saying now is going forward, the idea of that is now irrelevant. So, what are my views on this? I shared that there's good news and there's bad news. I want to share that, but first I want to talk about, just how quickly the world can change and how important it is for all of us, whether we're in retirement, we're 5 months away, 5 years away, or 20 years away. It's so important for all of us to have a financial plan. to have an idea of if we're not retired yet, how much do we need to be saving, what our goal is, what retirement would look like, and if we are retired, to have an idea of how much money that we can spend each year. And as the world changes, we need to be able to update that plan. Now, the gold standard for having a financial plan is to work with a financial advisor that is a fiduciary to you 100% of the time. I know that a lot of my audience wants to do it themselves. If that's you, if you want to put together your own plan, a lot of people just simply build their own plan in Excel or Google Sheets. But you know what? Takes a lot of time to do that, dozens of hours, if not hundreds. And it's super easy to make a mistake. So don't do that. There's lots of good software out there that is professionally developed that will guide you through the process, that will make it easier and give you more powerful tools. The tool that I like is called Bolden. It used to be called New Retirement. And Bolden's software makes it's super easy to use, it's very affordable, and it's very powerful, so why build it yourself? If you use the link that's showing up on screen here or the QR code, you'll be supporting the channel. I am an affiliate. Okay, so what's my views? I think there's good news and there's bad news. As I said at the open, lower interest rates are going to have a trickle down effect in many many areas that impact our lives, and it will reduce the cost of living for us. However, there's a reason that the Federal Reserve is doing this. Are they doing this because the pressure being put on them because of President Trump? No, I don't think so. In part, maybe a tiny bit. It makes them more likely to do it. But what they're seeing is the risk to rising unemployment. And that's not good for any of us. None of us want to lose our job. That's one of the most disruptive things that can happen to us in our lives. We don't want that to happen to us. And even if it doesn't happen to us, when unemployment rises from 4 or 5% to 6.5%, that still means that, 94% of us still have our jobs, but we're going to be more cautious. And a more cautious consumer, I know for myself personally, if I'm worried about losing my job, if my wife was worried about losing her job, we're now both retired. But back when we were working, you're more cautious. You try to pile away some cash in case you need it, which is a good reminder we should all have an emergency savings. For a young person, I think 3 to 6 months is the minimum. As we get older, and as it takes longer to potentially find our next job, I think the amount we should have saved should increase. Instead of having 3 to 6 months, I think we should think about having 6 to 12 months, because the reality is, if you're 45 years old, if you're 50 years old, if you're 60 years old, it takes longer to find a job. It shouldn't be that way, but ageism is alive and well in the United States. So number one, have an emergency fund. Number two, even if we don't get laid off, even if our neighbor doesn't get laid off, we still have the headwind for us as workers of artificial intelligence potentially taking our jobs. I am just blown away at the number of jobs and the types of jobs that are being taken away. Back when I was working, we had, financial analysts. We did a lot of research on stocks, and AI can do a really, really, really good job at the first level, and it makes everybody doing that type of work better, faster, and cheaper, but it also puts our jobs at risk, which is why I think it's important that we all think about, when do we want to retire, and can we if we know when we want to retire, then we can prepare for that ahead of time and save up earlier if we think, "Hey, you know what? If I lost my job at 55, I might opt to just not look for another job." And that's why I made this video up here, why waiting to 65 to retire might be a big mistake. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.